All right, so this is actually one of my favorite projects in this course. This is a little drawing app that we're going to create using HTML5 Canvas. So we're going to use the Canvas element, that's what this big square is, and there's a JavaScript API that we can use to draw shapes. We can draw, circles, rectangles, images, whatever, lines, and we're going to implement that with mouse events so that we can actually click and we can draw. Okay, so we can draw, and then we're going to add these controls down here where we can actually change the color. So I'll change it to red. I'll start to draw. And we can change the width of the pen or the line here. So if I go down to 5, you can see it's a little smaller. I'll change the color to like a greenish color and bring this to 20. Okay, and the highest we can go is 50. So that's the thickest we can go. And the lowest we can go is 5. And we can clear it with this button here. So I think it's a cool little Canvas app and I think you'll enjoy it. So let's go ahead and start on the interface, and then I'll talk a little bit about creating shapes, creating circles and lines with Canvas, and then we'll move into the mouse events and drawing, and then these toolbox controls down here. Okay, so we're going to get started on our drawing app, and I'm just going to leave the browser a little wider than usual just so we can fit the whole canvas in there. Because we want it to be quite big since it's a drawing area. So for the title here, let's say drawing app, and we want to add our canvas element. So say canvas. I'm going to give it an ID of canvas as well. And basically this just allows us to have an area that we can use the Canvas API on. So in JavaScript we can draw shapes and lines and do all types of cool stuff. Now I do want to give this a width. I'm going to give it a width of 800 and height. So we have 800 height. I might make that a little smaller later, but if I save that, we're not going to see anything. The canvas is there. If we open up our Elements tab in the DevTools, you can see if I highlight over canvas, we can see the outline of it. And you can add CSS to this, like we could say style. You don't have to do this, but just to show you, we could say like background red and save, and now you can see the outline of our canvas. All right, and I'm just going to get rid of that. Nothing is going to go inside the canvas tags, but what we do want is an area under the canvas to have our toolbox, which is going to be like where we can increase and decrease the size of the pen and so on, and change the color and clear it. So let's create a div with the class of toolbox here, and in here we'll have a button. So this button will have an ID of decrease, and I'm just going to put a minus sign inside the inner text here, and then under that we'll have a span, and this is going to have an ID of size. So the initial size I'm going to say 20, and then under that we'll have another button, and this is going to have an ID of increase, and inside here we'll have a plus sign. Okay, we also want the color, so let's say input, and this is actually going to be a color input. So HTML5 has color inputs, so the type will be color. We don't need a name. The ID will also be color. And then finally we want a button to clear it, so we'll say button, we'll give it an ID of clear, and I'm going to put an X inside of that. All right, so if I save that, it's going to look like this. Okay, now we're going to style it, and you can see the color picker here, which is pretty cool. It's just an HTML5 input of color. But let's jump into the style sheet, and surprisingly we're not going to have to do too much here. I'm going to keep the Roboto font. Let's give the body a background color of light gray. We'll do F5 3 times, and then I want to get rid of overflow hidden in case we have to scroll, and that should do it for the body. For the canvas, so the canvas I'm going to give a border. So let's say border, let's do 2 pixels solid, and I'm going to use steel blue. Of course you can use whatever colors you want. And then we have our toolbox, which has all the controls. So for the toolbox I'm going to set a background color of steel blue, and I'm going to set a border. Let's do border 1 pixel and solid, and we'll use slate blue for that. So you can see that down here. Now I'm going to display this as a flex box so that everything inside of it are line up as flex items. And let's set a width of this. I'm going to do a width of 804 pixels. So that should just, fill up the same width as the canvas. And then padding, let's do 1 rem padding like that. Now I want all of these controls here to have I want them to be in a big white box, everything. So I want to take all of the direct children of toolbox. So we can target that with class toolbox, and we want the direct children, doesn't matter what the element is, button, input, whatever, span. And let's set the background color to white. And I'll just make this smaller so we can actually see. So make the background color white. Let's remove any border, so border none. And let's set them to display. I'm going to use inline flex for the display, and then we can align items center and justify content center. Okay, so they're all on the same level. And let's make the font size much bigger. We're going to use 2 rem units. Okay, let's give it a fixed height and width of 50 pixels. So height and width. All right, let's add some margin. We'll do 0.25 rem. Space them out a little bit. Let's do padding. And padding will be same thing, 0.25 rem. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, so we have all these boxes. Now the last one, the clear, I want that to be set over here. So what I can do to target that is say the direct children of toolbox, but I only want the last one. So I'm going to use the pseudo selector of last dash child. Okay, so it's the last child element in the toolbox. And I'm just going to set margin dash left to auto. And if I do that, now it gets pushed over to the side. All right, cool. Let's actually add a pointer as well. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the interface. And I mean, of course, you can make this as big or small as you want, but we're going to go with this. And in the next video, we'll start on our JavaScript. We'll get into Canvas so that we can actually draw on this and control the pen and all that. All right, so we're going to start on our JavaScript, and we're using the Canvas API, which is a way to draw graphics or draw shapes on the canvas using JavaScript, and we're using the HTML5 canvas element. So a basic example here, we can bring in our canvas, and then we create a context using getContext, create a 2D context, and then we can set certain properties and methods like the fill style set to green. Fill rect will create a rectangle. The first two are the positioning, so it's 10 over from on the x-axis of the canvas and then 10 down on the y-axis. The width is 150, the height of this is 100. All right, so I'm just going to grab that. So we're bringing in canvas. It does have an ID of canvas, so we'll bring that in, and then we create a context. Now, I actually want to draw a circle. So I'm going to have a function called draw circle, and we are going to be using this function in the final version. Draw circle is going to take in an x value and a y value. That's going to be the positioning on the canvas where we want to draw the circle. Now if we go, I think there's a link down here. Yeah, drawing shapes. And let's see, paths. And right here. So to draw a circle, we need to begin a path and then create an arc. And the arc takes in the positioning where you want to put it, the radius of the circle. I think this is the start angle and the end angle. This right here. And then if you want it clockwise or counterclockwise. So I'm actually going to grab this. So we're going to begin a path. Now the values here, I don't want, this is 75 over, 75 down. I want this to be wherever x is that's passed in and y. And then the size I'm going to have in a variable called size, and that's going to be a global variable. So up here I'll say let size and set that to 20. Okay, so that'll get passed in, and then 0 for the start, and then the end will be math.pi times 2, and then we don't need to pass anything in here. So just doing that, if we take a look, it doesn't do anything because we haven't filled the circle yet. So what I'm going to do is set a color on the circle first. So let's do ctx dot and then fill style. And I'm going to set that to a variable called color, which I'm also going to set up here because we want this to be accessible outside of this function. So the color initially I'll set to black. And then let's fill the circle. So take our context, and there's a method called fill. Now if I save that, we have to call the function. Let's call draw circle. And let's say we want to start it 100 over and 200 down. So I'll save that, and now it's going to plot a circle, or draw a circle, 100 over on the x-axis and 200 down on the y. And that's within the canvas, not the page. All right, now we also want to be able to draw lines. So let's say function draw line, and this is going to take in the move to positions, x and y positions, like where we want to move to, and also where we want to draw the line from and to. So what we'll pass in is x1 and y1. So that's going to be the move to, x1 and y1, and then the line to, which draws the line, will be x2 and y2. All right, so in here we need to, again, begin a path. So begin path. And then let's do ctx dot move to, and that's going to be x1, y1. So that's going to move to a specific position. It's not going to plot anything or draw anything. It's just going to move to it. Then let's say ctx dot line 2, and that's going to go to x2 and y2. All right, now we want to apply a color, so we do that with ctx dot and stroke style. So stroke is like a border kind of. So when we use a line, we're using a stroke. So the stroke style is going to be the same color as the circle, so basically the global color, which is going to start off as black. We're going to be able to ultimately choose our color here, but it's going to start as black. And then the line width, so let's say ctx dot line width, and we're going to set that to a variable of size, which is this 20 to start with. And then finally, to actually draw the line, we need to call stroke. So ctx dot stroke. And then let's go down here and let's say draw line, and we'll say let's start 300 over on the x-axis, 300 down on the y-axis. So that's basically the move to, which you can think of as having your pen off the paper. You're moving to a certain spot. The second two arguments we're passing in is the line to, so that's with the pen down. So we'll say we'll go from 300 to 500. If I save that, now you can see we have a line. It starts, we move to 300, 300, and then we drew down from 300 to 500. All right, so, and of course, we can change, if we want to do like a diagonal line, we could change this to 200, something like that. Now we're not actually going to call these like this. We want to call those when we have our mouse move event because it's going to be dynamic. All right, one other thing that I want to do here is the x values and y values. I want those to be global as well because we're going to be using those in multiple places and reassigning them. So I'm just going to initialize x. We'll just say let x, and we'll say let y. So they're undefined right now. All right, and yeah, I think that's good. So in the next video, what we'll do is start to deal with our mouse events. Like on the mouse move, we want to be able to draw, we want to create our circle and lines, and we want to know if the button is pressed or not too if we're moving, because we only want to draw if our mouse is down. So we'll get into that stuff in the next video. Okay, so we have a couple functions here to draw a circle, draw a line, and I'm not calling them anywhere just yet, but we want to start to deal with our mouse events. So ultimately we want to be able to hold our mouse button down and drag and draw based on the color selected, based on the the line selected, or the width, whatever you want to call that, the size. So let's go above our functions here, and let's take our canvas. So we're going to take our canvas and add an event listener, and I'm going to listen for a mouse down event. So basically when I click and I hold it down, that'll be a mouse down. And we're going to pass in our event object here, and I'm going to have another global variable up here right under size, and we're going to call this is pressed, because we want to know if the mouse is being pressed, and that's going to be false to begin with. But once we have mouse down, we'll say is pressed is then going to equal true. I also want to get the position of where the mouse is, and that's what these x and y values are. So let's set x here to e.offset x, and then we'll set y to e.offset y. Okay, and that'll give us the positioning of where the mouse is. In fact, I'll go ahead and console log. Let's log is pressed, and let's log x and y. So I'll go over here and I'll open up my console. Just reload that, and you'll see we get true because when I mouse down, it's true, and then the position where I clicked. All right, so if I go, if I go up here, you can see it's a very low number. The top is cut off because of my console, but you can see if I click all the way over here, it's at like 1. Right? If I click outside of the canvas, nothing happens, but if I click right on the edge, that's it's at -0. So 1. As I go over, you can see that first number climb. As I go down, you can see the second number climb. Okay, so that's our x and y positioning, and is pressed is true. Now, when we release, I want is pressed to be false, and I want to clear these values. So I'm just going to copy this, and I want to change this now to mouse up. So that's on release. We're going to set is pressed to false, and then we're going to set x and y just equal to undefined. Oops. So let's set that to undefined, and we'll console log it there as well. So if I go, I'm going to click and hold true, and that gives me the positioning. I'm going to let go. I get false, and the positioning is undefined. Okay, so that's what I want. I'm just going to get rid of the console logs because we don't need those anymore. But now it knows if we're holding it down or if the mouse isn't being pressed. Now we want an event for mouse move. So I'll just copy this real quick, and let's set this to mouse move. All right, now mouse move, we can get the positioning, but we only want any of this to happen if the mouse is being pressed. So let's do an if here, and let's say if is pressed. Okay, so if that's true, it means we're holding it down. Then let's create a variable here called x2 and set it to the positioning, so e.offset x, and then do the same thing for y. This will be called y2. All right, and we can go ahead and console log this, x2 and y2. And now if I go and I click and hold, you can see the position of wherever my mouse is. Now, instead of console logging, I actually want to draw. So I'm going to call draw circle, and what's going to go in here is that the position, the x2 and the y2. Now, if we save that, we come over here. I'm just going to close up the console. Now, if I click and I hold, what's going to happen is it keeps drawing circles. Okay, so every time I move the mouse, we get the values of the position, we pass them into draw circle, and it draws a circle. Now, the problem we have is if I go really fast, you can see that there's spaces in between the circles, and we don't want that. We want just a straight line no matter what. So in addition to draw a circle, we're going to draw a line. So we'll just copy that down and let's say draw a line. Now this is going to be where we draw the line, but we need to add the move to positions as well. So this move to is the first two arguments passed in, which is going to be X and Y. Okay, now if we check it out now, we have this weird effect going on, and that's because after we do this, we want to set the X value to whatever the current position is, and the Y value to whatever Y2 is. So now if I come over and draw, so what's happening now is the line width is not as wide as the circle, because I actually forgot down here I set line width to the size. So line width and radius of a circle, that are two different things. So if I multiply this by 2, it should end up working and being the same. So now it's just a straight line. Okay, the width of the radius of the circle or the size of the circle is the same now as the line width of the line. So they're both being drawn. We don't have any of that skipping going on or anything like that. All right, so pretty cool. Cool. All right, so in the next video, I want to have these controls work. I want to be able to change the color, change the line, change the width or the size, I guess, and also be able to clear it out with this button rather than having to reload. So we'll do that next.